I am Guillermo Martinez, Deputy Director and Intergovernmental Liaison for the Institute on Immigrant Integration, Research and Policy at the Rockefeller Institute of Government at the State University of New York. We are honored this morning to have our distinguished panelists and speakers joining us. And we are excited, extremely excited, to have over 200 educators, campus administrators, legislative staff, and policymakers join us during this forum. We welcome campus leaders from across the City University of New York and the State University of New York systems, and from campuses as far away as California, Montana, Utah, Alabama, Illinois, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and the District of Columbia, who are all with us this morning. Over 200 years ago, Simón Bolívar, the great South American statesman, once said, "Nations march to greatness at the same pace as their educational systems evolve." Nothing holds more true today. Major demographic changes are impacting every sector of our society, including higher education, where 31% of all U.S. higher education students are immigrants or children of immigrants, and in New York, where 47% of all higher education students are immigrants or children of immigrants. Today's webinar will highlight the march towards having our higher education system evolve to do the best possible job to help immigrants integrate. Now, I am honored to introduce to you Dr. Dina Refke, Executive Director of the Institute on Immigrant Integration, Research and Policy, a thought leader, an agent of change, and an academic powerhouse. Dr. Refke?
Guillermo, thank you so much. You really did set up us on the right foot here. So welcome again to the webinar on the role of higher education in immigrant integration. We're thrilled to have you here. And I couldn't say it better than what Guillermo said. Higher education has long served as the springboard to social mobility. It has been recognized as the engine of economic development and the accelerator of social cohesion in American society. Today, we welcome institutions of higher education who have recognized the value of providing access to foreign-born residents and of ensuring their success in meeting their academic and career goals. So they embrace these goals as a matter of human rights, a matter of social justice, a matter of economic development, a matter of operationalizing the ethos of inclusion, social cohesion in their communities, a matter of developing core competencies of all its students, foreign-born and native-born, and a matter of creating civically minded global citizens who are engaged with their communities and are invested in the well-being of all its residents. Our speakers today lead efforts on their campuses that are rooted in the radical notion that it's not enough to provide access to higher education for foreign-born residents and foreign-born students, but access without success is meaningless and useless. They invest in building and maintaining infrastructures that address adverse social determinants of success. And these determinants are not academically related, but they still interfere with the ability of these students to succeed. They build and maintain support systems that proactively advance not just academic integration on campus, but social integration, community integration, and career integration. They do not just focus on recruitment of students, but make sure students are retained, reach their academic goals, and find employment in their fields of choice and contribute to economic development of their communities. They are building blocks of success because students do not exist in a vacuum, but their academic lives interact with their social and community lives. They recognize, these institutions, that without an infrastructure of support, access alone will not guarantee success. And success is a function of being able to address all the non-academic needs, those social needs that an immigrant prospective student face in the US. Success is dependent on dismantling the many barriers that immigrant students face, and is equally dependent on leveraging the many assets and talents that these students possess. It's my utmost pleasure to welcome our distinguished speakers. Their full bios we'll include them in the chat. In the interest of time, we will not be introducing them briefly to you. We will be introducing them briefly to you rather, and refer you to their bios for a more full details on their academic journeys. The webinar has two main segments, the speakers' presentations and the discussion segment. So we ask you to please jot down your questions in the chat, jot down your comments, and we will address them in the discussion section. We will try to address as many of your questions as our time allows for that segment. The webinar is recorded, so if any of our colleagues missed it, please direct them to the Institute's website to view the recording. Now I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Dia Abdu, founder and director of Every Campus a Refuge and professor of English at Guilford College, who will deliver our keynote presentation. Dr. Abdu is truly a champion in this movement. We are extremely honored to have her as keynote here. She describes her work as a radical re-envisioning and reimagining of the university campus, as transforming academic spaces from centers where disembodied knowledge is created and shared to spaces that transform broken hearts, bring wholeness, and engage in quote-unquote meaningful acts of solidarity while subjecting them to rigorous self-awareness and criticism, unquote. Dr. Abdu founded a powerful program that promises to transform all those who engage in it, elevate the humanity in all of us, and create quote-unquote softer landing and stronger beginnings for refugees. Without any further ado, Dr. Abdu, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Dina. What a lovely introduction. And thank you, Guillermo, for having me here. I'm truly honored. And to the rest of the folks on this call, welcome. It's wonderful to see my best friends, Allie and Catherine. And I can't wait to be in a conversation with you later. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, which is always a challenge. Does it work? It's fantastic. All right. So as Dina very generously introduced me already, I'm Dia Abdu. I go to a Quaker school, so we use a first name. So ignore the doctor at the beginning there. I'm Dia. I teach at Guilford College, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I'm the founder and director of Every Campus a Refuge. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes with you here telling you about Every Campus a Refuge and the ways in which universities can act as resettlement campuses and why I feel that that's the future of higher education. I really appreciated what Dina said about success and wholeness and supporting the wholeness of an individual. In 2015, I was, as I say, usually minding my business, teaching poetry and prose to students. But you all remember it was the height of the Syrian refugee crisis. And I was really struggling with how I can leverage my position. I was a tenured professor at Guilford College, and I really wanted to respond in a very meaningful and material way to clearly this global calamity. And I was lucky enough to hear Pope Francis, who, like the rest of us, was shattered by that image of Aylan Kurdi, that little 4-year-old boy who drowned with his mother and brother on their way from Turkey to Greece. And Pope Francis's response to that travesty was to call on every parish in Europe to host a refugee family. And a very simple thought occurred to me. Isn't a college or university exactly like a parish, right? What's a parish? It's a small city that's bound by shared values, a shared ethos, and that has everything necessary to support newcomer families. So think about your campus, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but you probably have housing, you have cafeterias, you have clinics, you have career services, and human resources that can certainly live up to this task of radical hospitality. That's what the Pope was doing, calling on small communities to engage in welcome and hospitality. I was inspired by Pope Francis, but really this is very personal and very meaningful to me. I am Palestinian. I'm the daughter of Palestinian refugees. This is my beautiful grandmother. She looks so happy in that picture with her family members. Oftentimes people say, are you in the picture? I'm not, but I love that they see my face in my family's faces. My grandmother is the one holding the bowl, beaming at the photographer. She was displaced from Palestine, ended up in Jordan, was never able to go back to Palestine. And her experience in displacement really informs the way I understand what it means to be a refugee, to look for home, to look for belonging, to look for inclusion. I'm not sure if you know this, but also the word for campus in Arabic is haram. So Dina might know this, al-haram al-jami'i. And the word haram is beautiful. It's a word that means a physical space that is sacred, inviolable. It's a sanctuary, a refuge. And so those ideas coalesced for me. The Pope's call on every parish to host a refugee family, my understanding of a campus as a space of safety and refuge, an inviolable sanctuary. But what was really also special about the place where I was, Guilford College, and I'm sure it's true for all of you, we believe as higher education institutions, we aspire to these values that I put here on the slide, right? We all say we want to advance the building of community. We all want our communities to be diverse and to treat each other equally. What was also really special about Guilford was that we also espoused and articulated values of integrity, justice, and stewardship. So while community diversity and equality were, I guess, words that I heard before and values that I've heard articulated before by higher education institutions, these were interesting and new to me. Stewardship especially is key here. Stewardship, and Guilford is a Quaker institution, but stewardship is an important value. It means that we are mindful, intentional about the ways that we steward the resources at our disposal. And if you're an institution that espouses equity and equality, then how are you stewarding your resources in ways that align with those values? How are you stewarding your campus, your buildings, the resources at your disposal in ways that align with justice, in ways that align with diversity, in ways that align with equality? Guilford College is also a particularly unique place in that it stands on a woods that was part of the Underground Railroad, and escaping enslaved people would hide in the expansive root system of the woods that abuts Guilford College, and the Quakers who lived in that area would smuggle them up north. So it's something really special about Guilford's DNA as a place of sanctuary and as a place of refuge. Over time, however, I've come to really understand this effort, not just as radical hospitality. It's not just something that's in line with our values as institutions that welcome, that include, that aspire to diversity. It is also a responsibility that we have, right? That it is a kind of radical accountability. So many of our campuses sit on land where Native people lived. So much of our policies around the world displace human beings who are indigenous elsewhere. And new Americans, newcomers, when they land on our shores and are resettled in our cities, are our community members, and we are accountable to them. So for me, it's an important spectrum to imagine that we not only do this because we can and we have the capacity to welcome and include, and as Dina said, offer a softer landing and a stronger beginning, but because we must, because we're parts of systems that really should give back and ensure the wholeness and the well-being of all of our community members. Just a reminder that the U.S. has been resettling refugees for a very long time. In 1980, we established USRAP. And then a very exciting development in 2023, last year, when we launched Welcome Corps and Welcome Corps on campus. And that means that universities can engage in refugee support in a variety of ways, whether it's through partnering with a resettlement agency to co-sponsor refugee families, or to directly sponsor a refugee family under Welcome Corps, or to directly sponsor refugee students under Welcome Corps on campus. So wonderful opportunities that await us for expanding welcome and inclusion to the United States. Refugee resettlement typically happens here. So this is a map of where resettlement agencies are. And I want you to look at that map, and I want you to imagine all of the places where resettlement is not happening. What we're trying to do collectively is to expand where welcome happens, to expand where refugee resettlement happens. And I like to look at this map. This is a map of where we all are, higher education institutions. There's so many of us. There are parts of this map you cannot see at all. My heart flutters at that idea that refugees can and should be welcome everywhere in this country, and especially where higher education institutions can play an important pivotal role in these integration efforts. So every campus of refuge really tries to live out that mission. We want to mobilize every college and university in this country to host refugees, whether they're families or students, on campus grounds and support them in their resettlement so that we can together transform where resettlement happens and create ecosystems of support by the thousands across the United States. I've used a term and I want to define it here. A resettlement campus is a campus that provides material and human support to refugees, either students and very crucially, non-students. It's a campus where resettlement for refugees happens. It's a campus that is a site for refugee integration and inclusion. So one of the things that I want to clarify very quickly is that universities have been supporting refugees and newcomers for a long time, and we're all doing wonderful work. I want to share this typology to give you a sense of the kind of different ways in which universities typically support. So some universities offer service learning opportunities. Some universities support scholars at risk. Some universities send students to camps abroad in Greece or in Turkey. We're talking about this model, the resettlement campus model, where a university offers bricks and mortar and human expertise and support and partnerships to support newcomers. And why does this work? Why are we ideal for becoming resettlement sites? It's because we have everything. We are truly like small cities. I want you to go on a thought experiment with me. I'm going to show you some slides that ask you to imagine who you are and what you have on your campus. We have facilities, we have resources, we have amenities, and very importantly, we have partnerships with the community that can allow us to engage successfully in this work. So think about your campus. Campuses are abundant. I think that's the term that I want to use really very meaningfully and intentionally, abundance. So coming from a place of abundance that rather than a mindset of scarcity. What do we have on our campuses? Do we have housing? Do we have English language support? Do we have career services, clinics, art supplies, libraries? Please put in the chat some of the things that are occurring to you about where on your campus you might be able to leverage some resources to support our newest Americans who are resettling in your town and in your city. But these are some examples of the ways in which universities have already supported refugees. They've offered them employment. They've offered them access to spaces that provide healing, whether it's the lake or the gym or the woods. They've offered them support through counselors. They've offered them free supplies or musical instruments, access to sports through teams. They've offered them meals in the cafeteria, English language programming, safe and free campus-owned housing, a farm for produce. I want you to think about your campus and really would love to hear from you in the chat where on your campus you might be able to leverage some of the resources. I want to share with you the story of one particular refugee. His name is Ali. Ali al-Khazraji was hosted on Guilford College's campus, and Ali is an artist and a calligraphist. He escaped 2 assassination attempts and ended up in the United States. He came a week before the Muslim ban along with his family from Iraq. And while he was on our campus, he had access to art supplies and then, of course, a studio, and we were able to exhibit his work on campus. And I keep telling people, where in the world is there housing and a gallery in the same place except a university campus? The image on the right says Guilford College in Arabic. It's a beautiful piece. These are some of the images of folks who have become part of our community. These are newcomers who have accessed our campuses in really meaningful ways, and we love sharing their stories. Another important piece is that you exist in an ecosystem. You are not by yourself. You exist in a city, in a town, with partnerships that exist or can be deepened or can be developed to support newcomers. So I want you to think, who's in your community? Local grocery stores, faith-based organizations, businesses, libraries, local resettlement agencies, share with me in the chat, where are some of the partners that you partner with already or can partner with to support newcomers? But here are some examples. Local grocery stores have provided free culturally appropriate food. Local bike organizations provide free bikes and helmets. We have partnered with local faith communities, mattress stores to provide a plethora of in-kind donations and material needs. These are some of the images from our various ICAR chapters that show the power of community in support. Another crucial piece for us, because we're higher education institutions and we educate, that's what we do. This is powerful place-based educational experiences for our students. Lots of universities have either programs or departments or student clubs or organizations or offices that work on immigrant and refugee issues or research or service learning opportunities. How can we leverage those to support? Here are some examples. You can do that through a certificate, for example. You might be able to involve your students in supporting refugees and offer them either credentials or certificates. You might leverage a graduate assistant position to support newcomers in ways that align with their discipline, whether it's social work or public health or community health. You might have a course where students might volunteer with a local refugee family and work on a project. I want to share 3 powerful examples. At Guilford College, we actually have a minor. It's called Forced Migration and Resettlement Studies, and students get credit for hosting refugees on Guilford's campus and supporting them in their resettlement. One of my favorite projects, and I'm so glad we have Allie on this call, is Russell Sage College. Their student designed this book. And this book is called I Belong in Albany. Dina, can we make sure that everybody gets a copy of this book in Albany? I feel like it's one of the most wonderful things that's come out of ECAR. This particular student was working with a refugee family and noticed that the children could use some help with their English. So she was a graphic design student. She designed this coloring book where every letter of the alphabet coincides with a landmark or a thing the kids would see in Albany. What a great way for the children in that family to learn about their city and to learn the English language. But I think that every city in this country should have an I Belong in. I'm just waiting for the I Belong in Greensboro. We need to get it going across this country. This is one of my students talking about the ECAR minor at the United Nations. Students are wonderful. They are providing interpretation. They're sharing meals. They're acting as cultural brokers. They're providing community connections. They welcome refugees at the airport. They prepare campus housing. Here's a group welcoming at the airport. They assist with job hunting and shopping and transportation, tutoring, filling out those government forms or those medical insurance forms. Please navigate to this QR code. Where a few months ago, my colleagues and I published a piece about the impact participating in this work has on students. This article is called Seeking Justice, Seeking Hope, Refugee Resettlement Campuses and Transformative Pedagogy in Higher Education. And we had 3 key findings: that when students participate in this work and support our newest Americans, our newest neighbors, it impacts their careers positively. It allows them to understand a global issue on a very practical local level, and it transforms their idea of what higher education is and can do. At a time when students are still figuring out the relevance of what we're doing and they're disengaged and disconnected, this is a way to bring them back to the purpose of higher education. There's also a study that shows the impact on refugees. Please navigate here. We're currently finalizing a study of 6 ECAR chapters. This early study shows that participating refugees experienced greater sense of financial stability and a greater sense of belonging. We're so proud of all of the ECAR chapters. We recently added Modesto Junior College in California and Millersville University in Pennsylvania, which is wonderful. They're supporting refugee families. These chapters across the country have supported more than 500 refugees, so our work is incredibly powerful and expansive. The flagship chapter at Guilford College alone has hosted nearly 90 refugees, families, single cases from all over the world. I've put the countries on this slide, but you can see the diversity of the folks who are calling America their newest home. Now, for folks who want to do this, I get the questions, what does this cost? What does this mean? Of course, leveraging your students and your coursework is in itself beneficial and rewarding. But in terms of cost, we are thinking about housing, whether it's on campus or campus adjacent. Really, it's whatever is available in your area, and certainly that cost will differ. And then also a point person who can coordinate this effort. I encourage folks to really imagine the ways in which your students, your graduate assistants, your student clubs can take the lead on this, so that it is, again, a meaningful, place-based, practical experience for your students. I love sharing this picture. It brings us full circle in a way. Remember Ali, the Iraqi refugee that we hosted on our campus? When we learned that we would be meeting with the Pope a couple of years ago, we decided to send him a gift and to let him know about ICAR. And so Ali created this plate for Pope Francis. In Arabic, it says the biblical verse that Pope Francis quoted when he called on every parish to host a refugee family. This that you do unto the least brothers of mine, you do unto me. And in the middle is an image of the chapel of the Milk Grotto in Bethlehem, Palestine, where the Holy Family took refuge from violence. This work matters. It's the future as I see it, because it transforms where refugee resettlement happens. I want you to think about that map. It transforms our students' experiences. I want you to think about that impact that I shared. It transforms the experiences of refugees. It grounds the work in their agency and their dignity. And it certainly cements our place as higher education institutions in our local communities, whether we're private or land grant or public institutions. There's so many of us. The work is incredibly scalable. I want to end on a few slides to let you know that if you do this work, I am personally with you and ICAR is with you every step of the way. We have a best practices manual. We have a coordinator handbook. We have a checklist. We have curricula and course syllabi and resource folders that allow you to do this work from scratch all the way until you support a family transition off campus. One of the cool tools that I'd like you to use right now is to navigate to the ICAR map tool, which allows you to identify your closest resettlement agency, your closest refugee supporting organizations. Please, as a first step, reach out to your local refugee resettlement agencies, reach out to your local refugee supporting organizations and ask them how you can contribute, how you can help, how your students can support. There are also lots of opportunities for trainings from ICAR. I want to shout out the free certificate-based training that we offer to higher education institutions called Creating Inclusive Communities Together, Transforming Higher Education Through Refugee Integration. You can find all of those details on our website, everycampusarefuge.net. Another really important resource is funding. Every Campus a Refuge can provide funding to universities who want to begin this effort, and you can find that here. Finally, a really cool resource that we just launched is the Ahlan Manual. The Ahlan Manual for Establishing Resettlement Campuses Together is a manual that allows campuses to plan and begin building ecosystems around this work. I encourage you to navigate to our website, to email, to reach out to me. I wanted to end, and I'll stop share, on some news that were released today. Every Campus a Refuge is going to be working on an oral history project of resettlement campuses. And I'll share the link in the chat, but it's very exciting for us to collect, amplify, and share the stories of refugees who have been supported by higher education institutions in this way. We can't wait to hear about all the ways in which their lives have been transformed because of our interventions. Thank you, Dina and Guillermo, for having me so much.
Dr. Dia, thank you so much. Your passion is contagious. You are really inspiring us and showing us an example of what happens when we dare to dream, when we dare to reimagine, and when we move out of that that scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset, and to create really systems that operationalize our values of responsibility, accountability, inclusion, and diversity. And what Dr. Dia talked about in terms of refugees, we also want to extend to and widen the circle to other immigrants, newcomers, new Americans who come to us. Refugees are subsystems of immigrants. Not all immigrants are refugees, but also we wanted to really shift your mind around the idea of forced migration. Many immigrants are migrating because they have no choice but to migrate. Their migration is forced. Not only refugees have forced migration. So widening the circle to all immigrants, all newcomers will help us with that. Sveta Dubreva, Fellow on Immigrant Integration at the Institute, and Sveta will explore why institutions of higher education should care about all newcomers, all foreign-born population groups. She will examine the barriers to access and to success facing immigrant students. Sveta, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Repke. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sveta Dobreva. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the sociology department at SUNY Albany. And the topic I will be talking about today is on the barriers to accessing higher education that immigrants, refugees, and undocumented students face. I did this work as a fellow for the Institute on Immigrant Integration. The Rockefeller Institute is connected to the New York State Legislature, and so we were interested in doing applied research to understand what sort of higher education programs exist to serve refugees and immigrants, and to make some policy recommendations for how they can be improved or strengthened. So today I'm going to talk about some findings from both my literature review and interviews with university staff and faculty, specifically on the barriers that immigrant background students face. So my research question for the overall project has been, what is the role of higher education institutions in providing education, wraparound services, and support to immigrants, refugees, and undocumented students? Before I go deeper into the barriers for students, I would like to just briefly talk about why supporting their access to college education and professional jobs matters. So if you look at the left side of my slide, currently almost 1/3 of all higher education students are immigrants or children of immigrants. And very importantly, their share of the student population is rapidly increasing from 1/5 of all students 20 years ago to 1/3 today. And for a few states, their share of the student population is even higher. And in the case of New York State, for example, they make up almost half of all students. One subpopulation of students that is important to policymakers is undocumented students, who currently represent almost 2% of the total student body across the US. And their share of the total enrollment in college has actually dropped by half in just a few years, which raises some really important questions about the barriers that this particular student population faces in accessing education. And lastly, another subgroup I consider is refugees and refugee students. There aren't many very specific statistics available about refugees and education, but I found that about 6% of refugees worldwide access higher education, which is up from 3% in 2020. So at least globally, this trend is going in the right direction, but clearly the numbers are still very, very low. So when doing the literature review for my larger research project, the barriers that immigrants, refugees, and undocumented students face in accessing higher education was a very common theme. And a number of the barriers they face came up again and again in the literature. Financial need is the most commonly mentioned barrier to enrolling, but also a challenge to remaining a student and graduating. This might be obvious considering the fact that first-generation immigrants generally are working to establish themselves economically in the US, and we know that the cost of higher education in the US is overall quite high. This connects with the next point about family obligations and the need to work. If financial need is an issue, but students are able to enroll, they may need to work and juggle a job and classes. But also many students may need to work to help support their families. Working in the present may feel a more immediate and critical need than going to school and investing in the future. Another barrier is mental health. Many students of immigrant background may have experienced trauma. For example, we can consider the case of refugees, of course. Also, undocumented students may have mental health needs due to their precarious status, identity conflicts, and a larger political climate which may be anti-immigrant. One study highlighted, for example, the stress undocumented students face due to immigration laws and how that can affect their academic performance. Language is another area that may limit access to education, in particular for newcomers. If students are new to the country and language, they are also often new to the academic culture of higher education in the US, which can further add to their challenges. And the last barrier I'm going to mention here, which didn't come out of my literature review, but I learned from my interviews with faculty and staff, some of whom are here today, is the potential lack of information about access to higher education. Immigrants or children of immigrants may not really have the knowledge about how to access higher education in the US, about how to apply and get into college, how to access scholarships, or even to know there are scholarships and programs which they might be eligible for. And without this information, potential immigrant background students may not even attempt or consider pursuing higher education in the US. So while a good deal of the literature emphasizes the needs of immigrant background students, a small subset of studies highlights the assets that they possess and the fact that they can contribute to the university environment and to society at large. For example, undocumented students are said to possess strong civic engagement skills, resilience, and cultural and linguistic assets. By bringing in new perspectives and ways of thinking, refugee students, for example, positively impact domestic students and the community, especially in racially homogeneous parts of the country. And so, based on the literature and current university and state practices and policies, I identified a continuum of higher education programs supporting immigrant background students. At one end of the continuum is the access and right to education approach. And at the other end of the continuum is the holistic approach. Either of these approaches could include programs at a single institution, at larger organizations working with multiple institutions, or government policies. Under the access and right to education approach, the major goal is making it possible for students to enroll in college or another educational program. Some examples of this approach include in-state tuition policies for undocumented students, or scholarships to make it more possible for refugee students, for example, to access college and enroll in college. University programs and government policies in this approach don't typically include support beyond that, such as non-academic needs, including food or housing insecurity, mental health needs, and so on. On the other end of the spectrum is the holistic approach, in which universities support immigrants and refugees beyond enrollment. Such programs offer non-academic support to cover basic needs, such as food and housing insecurity, legal and career counseling, and social and mental health support. The focus is on supporting students throughout their entire academic path until they graduate. Such universities and programs recognize that many of the barriers immigrant background students face on the path to graduation aren't necessarily academic ones. And some examples of this approach include the World University Services Canada, and also CUNY Undocumented and Immigrant Students programs are a good example of a best practice for a service that supports enrolled undocumented students in a very holistic way. So taking a look at that continuum, I found in my research that university or state programs under the holistic approach offer the strongest support for students and make the biggest impact on their academic and professional development long term. And that being said, of course, programs and policies falling under the access to education approach are definitely a great initial step in supporting immigrant students, but offering holistic support has the highest impact long term. And so, in conclusion, immigrants and refugees do face challenges, quite a few challenges in accessing and completing higher education. Some institutions and states are already increasing their support, but there is much more that can be done to support immigrants, refugees, and undocumented students to fully develop their potential in achieving their educational and professional goals. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from the panelists about their important work and to the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Sveta. That is really informative work, wonderful piece you've created here, and it really lays the groundwork for the discussion that would follow. And so it is now our pleasure to welcome our roundtable speakers who will showcase their model programs, the model programs they are implementing at their institutions that operationalize the ethos of inclusion. It really is the holistic model that Sveta talked about. They take very seriously the responsibility of providing not just access, but intentional support to retain, complete, and succeed for immigrant students, to help them be retained, complete their degrees and their education, succeed, and then join employment in their fields of choices, regardless of who they are and where they come from. We have asked them to not only describe their programs, but reflect on the internal and external factors that either hindered or enabled their success, to synthesize the lessons learned from their experiences, and to help us all replicate these wonderful programs in our other campuses, and examine the strategies that they utilize to overcome the challenges and leverage the opportunities and neutralize the threats. So we will go first with the City University of New York model and Cynthia Niali Carvajal. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. And after Cynthia's presentation, we will also hear from the Russell Sage and Hudson Valley Community College model or partnership. We will hear from Ali Schiffing and Catherine Willis. And then after we hear from Russell Sage and Hudson Valley, from Ali and Catherine, we will open it up to all of the discussions, all of your questions. And so please take the time to jot down questions as they come to your mind, and we will address as many as we can at the end of the discussion. So without any further ado, Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dina. Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Carvajal. I am the director of CUNY Undocumented Immigrant Student Programs. I'm already seeing questions in the chat related to undocumented students. I'll definitely try to get to them, especially in the policy recommendation slides. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so folks can take a look at the slides that I've prepared to talk through this. And so, as I mentioned, this Undocumented Immigrant Student Programs at CUNY is a new department in our centralized office. I opened it in 2021. And what I'm going to talk about is the model that exists within the CUNY system. And as you may know, CUNY, similar to SUNY, has several campuses that they oversee. And so it's not that this model is expansive across our campuses, but that we're making efforts to make it a bit more accessible throughout. And so to give you all a little bit of background information too, because I know we're probably throwing a lot of words at you, I want to provide a brief overview on terminology that I'll be using and that my colleagues have been using throughout this conversation. So there's the term undocumented, which is someone without an immigration status. Then there's someone who could be categorized under PRUCOL, which stands for permanently residing under color of law. These are individuals who typically have an employment authorization document and have permission to be in the United States without a permanent status. This is a temporary status. New York State recognizes this category, which is why I'm mentioning it here. This includes DACA, temporary protective status, or TPS, asylum, that should be asylum pending and asylum granted. And then there are also individuals that we've been talking about that have bona fide statuses and pathways to citizenship. So this is refugee statuses, this is asylum granted statuses, these are permanent residents. So I break this down because access to resources and access to education, to public benefits varies depending on which of these statuses you fall under. So just a little bit of background context in that. I also want to give a New York context. It seems like there are some folks here from California, folks from DC and other spaces. New York City itself has almost 500,000 undocumented immigrants living here. This is data from 2019 from the Comptroller's Office. About 4,000 undocumented students graduate from high school every year just in New York State. And New York has the third largest population behind California and Texas, respectively, California being the first and Texas being the second. But when it comes to policy, New York is behind comparable counterparts like California, like Texas, and even New Jersey. And I'll break down a little bit more about what I mean by that, but I do want to get to the model itself. Breaking down CUNY as a context and what we're working with here. There are 18 undergraduate campuses. This doesn't count our graduate programs. And so our university oversees these campuses. They have varying population sizes of possible undocumented and PRUCOL students. And then community colleges I want to highlight because that's where the majority of our possible undocumented and possible PRUCOL students begin their journey. They either go there to get their associates or they transfer to a four-year university. CUNY itself has over 5,000 possible undocumented students or those with temporary status, so the PRUCOL identifier that I noted. However, this does not include the graduate programs, and it also does not include non-degree seeking programs where we engage with students in public high schools. So this is CLIP, College Now, and other non-degree seeking programs. Our population is also significantly diverse, and it makes sense. We're in New York State where a variety of, think of diasporic communities exist here. And so students identify as Latinx, Latine, as Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, among other identities. And so the CUNY population, the largest immigrant and undocumented students come from Mexico, Ecuador, South Korea, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and China. This is from a study from a professor at Queens College. And so at CUNY in 2019, Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez asked each of the campus presidents to identify at least 2 individuals at each of the campuses to serve as immigrant liaisons. So they would just be designated people that individuals who are immigrants could reach out to. Some of these liaisons also served as Dream.us scholarship program coordinators at our undergraduate campuses because we partner with them for the full tuition scholarship. And then my office, Undocumented Immigrant Student Programs in our centralized office, was created in 2021 to update and inform and address barriers that exist across our campuses and then create more sustainable resources for those that don't have them. And so the models I want to talk about, these are not, like, we didn't make these up. These have existed in other states. California has over 42, Texas has 3, New Jersey has 1. And I think there might be a couple of other states that I'm missing, but these following models that the kind of journey that we've documented here at CUNY is unique in that there are campuses that have liaisons, campuses that have initiatives, and campuses that have centers. Not all campuses have initiatives or centers, but everyone does have a liaison. And I'll break down what each of these models look like. But I do want to at least emphasize that the creation of these liaisons, initiatives, and centers were done through student advocacy. So students were protesting, they were saying they need more resources, access to information, and then campus leadership got on board, and then centralized efforts were created. Liaisons being those individual people that are designated at the campus, attend monthly trainings, initiatives being teams of liaisons that might have access to some funds. And so they create scholarships and fellowships and newsletters and websites. And then there are centers. They have full-time staff, full-time content expert staff, programming funds, and they develop the institution to support also undocumented students. And so the campus liaisons, their goal is essentially to build capacity, confidence, and knowledge among the designated staff in their multiple roles at the campus. They attend these monthly working groups that I mentioned, trainings on relevant topics and resources that typically the rest of the campus doesn't have access to or doesn't know where to access. Unfortunately, the funding is limited and it depends on what funding they may already have access to. But through our partnership through the Dream.us, we do have access to some funding that's specific to career services. The barriers that we've experienced with liaisons is, as I'm kind of hinting at, this is not their full-time role. meaning that they also have to meet the demands of their actual position. So, and that depends on their caseloads for the position. So for example, a financial aid advisor's caseload may look different than an opportunity programs counselor, and they may not overlap as much as one would hope. However, what has been really successful about campus liaisons is the strategies that we've been able to implement. So those who have access to some limited funds or who have partnered with our office or student dream teams have been able to request more resources from campus leadership, have been able to coordinate meetings with campus leadership to draw attention to this population that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And so for the outcomes for this group, liaisons have been able to address misinformation that's being shared at the campus related to in-state tuition access, related to campus data about this population, and also related to state aid. Then there are the initiatives. And so here are 3 of our campuses that have campus initiatives: Queens College, Gutman Community College, and Baruch College. These are more consistent resources. So they provide consistent support, consistent communication, one-on-one guidance, and they're able then to elicit input and data with students. These individuals have been able to solidify funding to their campuses, or have access to pre-existing funds from their departments, their respective departments, and they use that to do programming efforts to support this population. So it's the key difference between liaisons and initiatives is that initiatives are more consistent and more robust. They have funding and they're able to do programming. The barriers is, again, they are not full-time staff. This is not their focus. They are doing several other things, as you can imagine, working in university systems. However, the strategies that they've been able to implement that have been really successful is through these regular programmings, these more consistent availability to this population. They're better able to assess the needs and barriers that are unique to that campus and to the populations that are present. And so this has moved the initiatives to be able to highlight the need for full-time staff. So the campuses that I listed here have had conversations with campus leadership and are in a lot of ways moving towards having a full-time staff member and a center at their campuses. The outcomes is that through student regular input and consistent support, they have been able to establish paid fellowship opportunities and scholarships at the campus. So Baruch has a career-based paid fellowship opportunity open to anyone regardless of immigration status, and Gutman College has a full tuition scholarship for undocumented students. So these are the resources that we've been discussing that undocumented students need in order to continue their education, right? The financial need, holistic support, and consistent support. And so now I want to highlight the centers. These are the 3 campuses that currently have immigrant student success centers: John Jay College, Brooklyn College, and City College. John Jay College was actually the first campus in the state of New York to have an immigrant student success center. I opened it in 2018 and has since grown exponentially under the leadership of Denise Vivat, who currently leads it there. They have full-time staff, programmatic funds, physical space, and provide campus-wide support. And so with full-time staff, they're able to boast having someone whose sole focus is on understanding and supporting the immigrant and undocumented student population. And so their entire time is dedicated to that. They have the expertise to identify and consult on resources for students. So students reach out to the individuals at the centers with help needing to identify housing available for them because they're currently homeless, or don't know what emergency health benefits are available to them because of their immigration status. They also have programmatic funds. And what I mean by that is that the campuses are able to purchase participation incentives, food, honoraria to host events, to host conferences. And this is because the campus does prioritize fundraising for this initiative. They also have a physical space. So an actual space where students can go and build community with one another, identify support systems, and feel like it's a safe space for them to come together as a community. And they're also able to provide campus-wide information and trainings to address barriers and practices that can then be replicated at other departments. So, for example, I think John Jay, again, because it's the most robust of the centers, they're able to partner with career services to establish career-based fellowship opportunities across departments at the campus. So this becomes less about an undocumented student getting a paid internship at the center and more about an undocumented student getting a paid career-based internship in the major that they're invested in and the career that they're interested in. The strategies and outcomes that have come about these spaces, first and foremost, it's creating a sense of community. So this is a population of students that often feel alone and that they feel like they have to hide their immigration status. The centers create a space to build community with one another and also network with individuals who are navigating similar statuses. So they feel like they're not doing this alone. Paid career opportunities. So there's always a lot of struggles of being able to provide undocumented students with paid career-focused opportunities. The centers have been able to create those. And that's because the campuses fundraise for the centers to have consistent funds to provide these fellowships, stipends that are relevant to their career aspirations. They also provide relevant career guidance that the career centers are unable to provide at this moment, meaning that a student can receive information on how they can work regardless of immigration status through entrepreneurship, through their own business, through a worker co-op. And they're also able to get advice on what careers are actually accessible based on their immigration status. So because of New York State legislation doesn't permit everyone, regardless of immigration status, to get certification and licensing in teaching and in nursing, students are often advised until the very end of their academic career that they won't be able to pursue that career. But the center is able to advise them at the very beginning so that students can make those proper choices and identify another career or another way to engage with that major interest. And then also what's really important is that the center normalizes the conversation on immigration as it relates to undocumented students. So often, I think personnel are really hesitant. They don't have the confidence to talk about immigration status and will address it in a way that could frighten students. So they'll whisper about it or they'll say, oh, you shouldn't say that. But the centers normalize these conversations so that we can all feel comfortable addressing these statuses with anyone, regardless of immigration status. And so this has resulted in less misinformation, more direct referrals, more asks and clarifications versus just kind of sending students to somebody else who could maybe answer the question. And so the outcomes of all of these models, right, because they're all kind of coming together, is we've been able to update memos and policies on access to private funds and certificate programs that are available across the state. We've been able to clarify existing and complicated policies for undocumented students, such as in-state tuition and state aid, cultivate a sense of community, a safe sense of community and professional networks among students, expanded access to paid and career opportunities, regardless of work authorization documents, and I think most importantly, advocate and inform efforts for more resources. And so this I noted as like an escalating of resources. The campuses don't need to start with a liaison and then work their way to a center. Some campuses just started with the center. Some started with initiatives. It doesn't matter where you start. It's just a matter of having those resources. But the idea of how these models have begun to work is that access to one of these three models has allowed campuses to build towards a more sustainable resource and information. So they start off by providing knowledge and awareness. Then they begin coordinating targeted and protected data collection efforts to better understand the population. And then that leads to dedicated staff, funds, and space. And this has looked like trainings to clarify in-state tuition. And I hone in on that because that is a really complicated policy that our students are navigating and our staff are navigating. Accurate estimates on TAP and New York State DREAM Act rate of completion and how much money campuses are leaving at the state because their students aren't able to access TAP, an inventory of needs and barriers. And then finally, a dedicated staff and funds and space that may be available that can provide consistent guidance, institutional commitment, and reliable guidance in careers and postgraduate services and legal services. I do want to highlight the barriers that come with kind of starting any of these initiatives or any of these models is often it's a lack of prioritization. So immigration-related issues are often not prioritized because of, and it's often noted as like budget restrictions or a lack of information. The example that I'll give is at City College, they're opening their center this semester, but students have been advocating for 8 years to have a center. And the reasoning has always been, there's not enough money, budget cuts, the pandemic, like budget cuts, the pandemic, like it kind of goes on in a circle. And so the prioritization or the lack of is what's really impacting the implementation of these services. There's also the devaluing of the impact. So there's a misunderstanding of the complexity of this issue. So I broke down terminology because each of those categories have a variety of access to different types of benefits or not at all. And so this is a complicated issue, and that's often devalued or misunderstood. But also the assumption is that there aren't many undocumented students at someone's campus, when in fact there's a significant number at our CUNY campuses, considering the state that we're in and the city that we're in. And then lastly, the political context adds to this. So there's a lot of hesitancy to address immigration issues due to the political climate and concerns that can come about that. I'll let folks interpret that as you will, but the political context is often a barrier in establishing these robust services. I was asked to provide considering some policy recommendations based off of these models. One that I want to highlight initially is SUNY counterparts. So CUNY has my office at the centralized space. Campus centers exist. And although 3 SUNY campuses currently partner with the Dream.US scholarship, and that's Old Westbury, Albany, and I'm missing one. It'll come back to me and I'll put it, Farmingdale. Although they partner with the Dream.US scholarship to provide this full tuition scholarship, there isn't someone at the centralized office or at the other campuses to support undocumented students. So those students often find their way to me and ask for me to provide support, or like the centers or the liaisons or the initiative spaces. But our offices aren't familiar with the SUNY system and so have difficulty advising them. Secondly is state-backed, state-based support. I give this example often that in California in 2019, Governor Newsom required all public universities to have Dream resource liaisons and the ability to accept aid to establish centers. I think that really led to every single campus, every public university in the state of California to have an Immigrant Student Success Center, or they call it an Undocumented Student Resource Center. Thirdly, Undocu-allied trainings. You'll find that a lot of your faculty and staff have not received any formalized training on undocumented immigrants in their academic trajectory, so in their master's programs and their PhD programs. And that's because it's just generally not covered. So having an Undocu-allied training at the campuses can be significantly beneficial for students. Addressing career-based barriers. So I alluded to this. Unlike 15 other states, including New Jersey, undocumented students cannot access state licensing and certification for teaching, nursing, and social work. These gaps result in campuses not knowing how to advise students in those careers. And so addressing that policy would be significant in the state of New York. And then lastly, kind of a small note on opportunity for all. If you're coming from California, you may be familiar with this, but the UC system students and the UC School of Law, the UCLA School of Law began an effort to position state funds to be accessible for anyone regardless of immigration status, which would position university systems as state entities to be able to hire undocumented students. That has since been paused because of the political climate, or just it's an election year, but it's set to be revisited again in a year. But something like that in New York can also benefit our students and in all honesty, increase enrollment rates, increase access to college for a student population that would otherwise feel like they wouldn't have a future, even if they get a college degree, because they wouldn't be able to necessarily work in a payroll position, or they wouldn't be able to access funds at their campus. Yeah, thank you folks for listening. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll go and try to answer them.
Thank you so much, Cynthia Carvajal.
Carvajal. Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Yes, I owed it to you to pronounce it right this time. We turn it over to Allie and Catherine. Take it away, please.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Such a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm going to share my screen successfully. Let's see. Okay, I believe that's my nice full screen. Okay, hello. Thank you so much for having me and for being here. So my name is Allie Chafing, and I am at Russell Sage College, a private four-year college in Albany and Troy, New York. Russell Sage College and Hudson Valley Community College. My colleague who will introduce herself next. Just a reminder, we are ECAR chapters So that's a large part of what we're going to talk about today. Shout out to Dia, our keynote and my hero. Kathy?
Yeah, so hi, my name's Catherine Willis. I'm a sociology faculty at Hudson Valley Community College, and I'm also our ECAR coordinator, which is something I started last year when Hudson Valley partnered with Russell Sage College and received support from ECAR to host families in conjunction with Sage College. Something that's just interesting and will make sense as we move forward is my background before being the ECAR coordinator was coordinating service learning. And Ali has a similar background, and that will make sense why those backgrounds are important momentarily. So what we're going to do is if we want to start by just talking about what we have at our colleges that support students, and how from those sort of student-centered approaches, we really want to support students the most we can. But then also we've identified a need to move beyond directly supporting students, and ECAR was a really important pathway at my college to do that. And so we'll talk about that second. But first, we just want to start by talking about what we do on our college to supports refugees and all newcomer populations. So something we have at our college, like we have at many colleges, is we have ENL programming, so English as New Language programming. We've revamped it in the last couple of years so that for many of our English classes, we have an ENL course, which is a 4th credit class. So students who would not be ready based on English skills to take college level classes take a class which instead of it being 3 credit class, it's a 4 credit class where they get additional support. So it's great because it's a much more efficient way to help students get the language support they need while also moving through the college curriculum. We have admissions office. Our admissions office has skills, and they're really adept at advising students who are coming with credentials from different countries, assessing those credentials, figuring out how to get students the most recognition for the work they've done. We also have a life experience program, which is open to students who are enrolled in programs. So you can't do it if you're just taking a single course. You can't take advantage of this program. But the life experience program, you can submit a portfolio and it will evaluate your life experiences and help get you credit for those life experiences you've had that translate to college credit. So it can make it faster for you to move through an academic program. On the student side, we've had a conversation partners program in the past, which was a peer-to-peer student conversation program where we matched students who wanted to practice English with their peers. And so it was part of our service learning program, they would get credit for that. We've tried a few different iterations of that. We have a language club, which welcomes people who are interested in multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary dialogue. And we also do targeted outreach to many newcomer support organizations, whether that's bringing students on campus or having instant admission days where our admission staff will go to a location. So those are support for our college students, our soon-to-be college students that really support refugees, but also all newcomer populations. We have non-college programming as well, and these are really important. We have our Educational Opportunities Center, where there is non-college ESL classes. You can also get GED equivalencies and job training. So short-term job training. I have at the bottom of the slide, there's a few examples of what those short-term job trainings are. There's also the Attain Lab, which is computer skills. You can get certification in different computer skills, and those are open to the public. So anyone can walk into the Attain Labs and start their training. Finally, we have community education and workforce development. That is another pathway through which we offer ESL classes and a range of short-term job training opportunities.
Great. And the EOC programs are no cost. I believe.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Amazing.
Open to anyone in the community. A few other things that are really interested about there are a few other things that are very interesting about EOC. They're very understanding of the bumps in people's lives. You can start the program. There's frequent starts to the program. It's not just once a semester, like with college credits. If you leave the program, the door is always open for you to come back and pick back up where you left off, which is just this level of understanding and opportunity that is really great. Something we are working on at our college is to increase pathways between the EOC and our college courses so that completing an EOC program might translate to college credit if a student was to enroll in one of our college programs. Thanks.
Great. Yeah. And at Russell Sage College, the ways that we support students explicitly, I have in two categories here. The first is community-based programming off campus, where we try to promote college access. We've done that in one way, primarily with our local resettlement agency, the USCRI Albany Field Office. They have a MAC program, Making a Connection, which is an incredible mentorship program for newcomers aged 15 to 24 who have arrived within the past 5 years. So we partner with them and try to help provide individual specialized supportive pathway programming. We host info sessions at another local nonprofit, that's where this picture is, at the Refugee Welcome Center in West Hill, Albany. And those are peer-led info sessions, which we have found to be really powerful as an approach. And that covers everything from FAFSA to applications to 2-year versus 4-year. A lot of the kind of first gen college access findings inform our approach there. We also facilitate campus visits to local college campuses, and that's with a trusted liaison. So we have found that really having a direct connection to community partnerships goes a long way for us. The term cultural broker has come up in that work at times. And then on campus, I'm proud of a recent initiative that is for all students at Russell Sage, the Solutions Desk, which is just one email, one phone number, one place every day for any question anyone has. So that's been a nice kind of streamlined system that I see being especially helpful to those students from marginalized backgrounds. We host an intercultural cafe twice a week where students lead English language activities, and we host guests from the community. It's part of the service learning programming that Catherine mentioned. And I also included here the Boyer model of scholarship. Russell Sage follows that model, and I encourage everyone to look into it and the ways it can expand rank, tenure, promotion, and scholarship practices at your institutions. I feel really grateful to be at an institution that follows this model, which includes the Scholarship of Integration, which values interdisciplinary activities in a larger context, and the Scholarship of Application, which encourages faculty to apply content, expertise, and knowledge in applied ways to benefit society broadly. So a lot of the work that I get to do as faculty to support newcomer students and families is valuable, relevant scholarship for my tenure, rank, and promotion path, which I think is a really important shift in the way that we can more incentivize faculty to get directly involved in this work. The second piece here I'll speak to is research, which again, it's my role as faculty. I try to practice community-based participatory action research, where a lot of the newcomers we work with are directly involved in the design and implementation and dissemination of our research. So 2 things we did relative to the college access and pathways. One, a compilation of post-secondary options. So this was a nice user-friendly compilation of the 14 colleges and universities in the Capital District. There are many here, public, private, 2-year, 4-year, plus opportunities like the EOC, apprenticeships, employment training pathways, all kinds of post-secondary options. We tried to compile them in a very navigable way. And share those with our, say, the MAC attendees and the other newcomers that we partner with. And we also compiled multiple options within various career sectors. we were finding that, for example, some of the refugee students we'd work with as high schoolers would be saying, I want to be a nurse. And there are great options locally to become a nurse, but there are also great options to become a medical assistant, for example, at the EOC. So we would try to help position newcomers to navigate those choices, you know, the cost benefit, how long and how costly various pathways would be so that they can make informed choices based on their interests. The second piece that we did in this research in recent years was a community scorecard, which I was not familiar with, but it's a really neat tool for community-driven accountability and assessment of public services. So we, with students, created a community scorecard to rate how well institutions of higher education were positioned to help newcomer students succeed, immigrant origin students succeed. Just like Dina said, it's not just access to higher education, but it's success, retention, graduation, all of those goals. So we tried to, we came up with this 20-point system, which was based both on the current literature, on what promotes refugee student success at institutions, but also on our local research, which was co-led by community members. So we developed this 20-point scorecard and then ranked local institutions. We shared those results with the local institutions, and administration was really responsive and supportive. So we're looking forward to continuing to work through how we can all, as a collective, better reconstruct our institutions for refugee student success. And then, just some specifics on what was included within that scorecard: peer mentorship, ELL support, price transparency, whether or not financial aid appeal form is readily available on your website or not. These kinds of nuanced but really critical technical ways to support newcomer students. Interesting with the counseling and wellness center set of points. So I think that was up to 3 points. And we ended up ranking depending on how long the average wait time was. Of course, we know refugees are by definition from a trauma background in many ways, and being able to ensure that they'll have access to mental health support. Say one college locally, and I'm proud that my college is one of them, can offer mental health appointments with a licensed counselor or therapist within 24 hours, but some institutions have wait times up to 2 months. So we've decided to include that in the scorecard, for example. I believe, oh yes, I just wanted to thank, we were asked to include kind of funding. So we have worked with the CSTEP program, AmeriCorps, and Bringing Theory to Practice to support these projects. So I want to thank them for that.
Excellent. So what our colleges do in terms of our students is really significant and really important. And there's also some limitations that we face. It's really exciting. Cynthia's presentation about the CUNY system was really exciting for that, to see sort of big changes happening. But in terms of working with refugees and newcomers, one of the ongoing challenges is for us specifically as a community college, it still takes a year to get status as a resident. And community colleges are funded differently. And the challenge for financial aid applies to more colleges. Also, families have competing obligations. Newcomers have competing obligations in terms of their employment, language acquisition, coming to live here, and making their new forever home here. That makes it hard to think about going to college. So one of our questions is, how can we support everyone's learning, even if it's not in our college? And maybe we support their future learning or their children's learning in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I'm going to tell myself that I think we need to speed up a little bit. I think we're a little bit behind schedule. Okay, yes. So I'm going to transition us out, hopefully rather quickly, beyond just explicit student support, but also, like Catherine said, we want to talk about the ways that as institutions of higher ed, we can support families and communities. Institutions of higher ed are not always thought to be nimble or flexible, but I encourage us to think that we can be. If we just think of Dia and the ways that her idea sparked institutional action and transformational change. So much of what we do is based on the ICAR model and our very active community partnerships. Working closely with the organizations that support immigrants directly has enabled us to really creatively leverage resources. Dia, in her TED Talk, describes herself as a hacker. She hacks her university, and I think that we have found success in doing the same thing. We can get creative with service learning projects, campus facilities, multi-institutional grants. We have more flexibility than, say, the case managers working at the federally contracted resettlement agency and how we use our time and our resources. So we really try to respond to opportunities presented by working across organizations. It strengthens our collective impact and also supports the missions of our institutions. And we believe provides indirect, ongoing, and growing investment in immigrant inclusion in higher education broadly. The ICAR guests we've had on campus, we've had an Afghan family of 2, a Congolese family of 11. We've had 15 individual Afghan students and a Yemeni family of 7. None of them were enrolled at our college or at Hudson Valley College for that matter, but they are all potentially future college students, parents, future parents of college students, college grads themselves. So just building that kind of familiarity and understanding with higher ed in America, we think will have ripple benefits for generations. These are some ways that we provide direct support. Of course, the ICAR model, Good Neighbor Team is our USCRI Albany partnership, and the Intercultural Cafe, which I already mentioned.
One of the things that we see, one of the reasons why this is so important to us for, in terms of supporting immigrant integration, is that we're increasing the intercultural competence of our students and staff and faculty. We're doing that through increased service learning and volunteering opportunities, educational opportunities on campus. Both colleges have had different ways of integrating this into courses, whether it's single courses. At Sage College on our campus, we're looking at creating a micro-credential, which is like a minor, but at a community college. And what is so important in terms of our student learning for us is that students get a global experience without leaving our community. And that's a base equity issue that I think is a great learning outcome for all of us. Every time we do an activity related to ICAR, whether it's a coat drive, like we did in the winter, it always comes with opportunities for learning. And that's for our staff to learn, for our faculty to learn, and for our students to learn. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. We believe in helping build a capital region where everyone can help welcome newcomers. And so we really try to just invite our campus stakeholders in a variety of ways to get involved. And service learning, like Catherine said in the beginning, that's kind of both of our background and our pedagogical approach in higher ed. And I really can't emphasize enough, I think, how valuable that is. We have, say, nursing students helping refugees with their Medicaid paperwork, nutrition students helping a newcomer family figure out how to navigate the grocery store and their SNAP benefits card, education students sitting with non-literate refugee parents trying to utilize the parent portal at the school district. These are experiences that will help our students who are future nurses, public health professionals, and teachers. It's embedded within their education to connect directly with newcomers in meaningful, respectful, and supportive ways. We do preparation and reflection. So we think that we are investing in empathy and compassion and understanding of structural injustice for generations. We love service learning. I'll click through this quickly. This is part of our AmeriCorps program that's in its 4th year, partnering with all the local organizations to celebrate World Refugee Day together, really trying to center the experiences and voices of students with immigrant origins. We do a lot of community education. Catherine can talk a little bit about the Big Read.
Yeah, we applied this year for a Big Read grant, which if we get it, it would happen next January through June. We'll be reading this book about a refugee experience. The author would be coming to our campus. We'd be streaming the conversation to other locations. We're also holding writing workshops with for multi-generational writing memoirs at local public libraries, our local newcomer school, our local resettlement agency. So with lots of community partners, we have a fundraising, not a fundraising, a volunteer raising is our launch party, would be our launch party for this Big Read initiative. And so we really see education broadly and creating these opportunities as something that enriches our campus. It is a win for our campuses, is a win for our students and for the community.
Thank you. I'll just mention one piece here because we're short on time. The Family Mentors program, where we invite volunteers to partner with a family and provide mentorship and guidance. And we find that to be a really enriching framework for everyone involved. And again, it's kind of based in an education approach. We host it at Albany International Center, which is the public school in Albany, specifically for refugees and immigrants. It's a really incredible newcomer academy model. Again, part of our public school district. So we partner with them and base a family mentorship program there. And we're finding that helping families learn how to advocate for themselves in the school system from the beginning can be transformational. And we hope that that continues throughout their learning for all members of their family and communities. And it's really nuanced. Any of us who have navigated education know that what rules are flexible and what are not. For example, we have families ask, why can't my child go to the school that is closest to our house? Well, you know, there was this equity refeeding system, this elaborate process. Wonderful, but there is a form where you can appeal and request the closer school. Whereas immunizations are required. Is there an appeal for that? Largely no, but there is a mobile health clinic that can visit the school twice a week and provide that service. So the nuanced and important ways to help families navigate has been really successful. Catherine, you want to share anything here?
I'll share. So one of the advantages, Ali mentioned the Boyer model. I have flexibility in my role too, and that flexibility has been a really great way of integrating into new networks that we're not integrated into, and that really provides us with opportunities to identify places where we can contribute.
We do need to wrap up.
Yeah,
I just got a Zoom chat. We're going to wrap up. I'm going to click. Thank you, Catherine. I apologize. I think we're going to lose people here. Just pictures where we've celebrated learners at all levels. Kindergarten graduation during COVID online. Samira from middle school. We have permission to celebrate them here. Mary, Fardine. So we try to celebrate learning at all levels. And here's a recent college grad we're really proud of. And her dad works at the college. So just another example of kind of the holistic ways we try to support communities. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so very much. This really gives a whole new meaning to what we call a holistic model. It really is a labor of love more than anything. So we unfortunately do not have time for discussion. So we encourage you to reach out directly to our distinguished speakers here and panelists if there are any questions. But I'll throw out a final question for anybody to answer. And it really has to do with the barriers that Cynthia have alluded to. So obviously we're doing this because we're hoping that these incredible models are going to be replicated elsewhere. And so, Cynthia, you referred to 3 different barriers that really stifle or hinder our ability to replicate or our ability for these wonderful programs to take off in any campus. And that has to do with prioritization, with devaluing impact and the political context. So obviously we know that to do anything, you have to have leadership buy-in. You have to have people who come, who have skin in the game, who are really excited and motivated to do this. So how do you make the business case? And this is for any of the panelists. I'm sure you are incredible advocates. That's why you are where you are. So you made the business case. You made the case for transformative education education, not just for the foreign-born student, but for the native-born. You made the case for enrollment. So can you, and you made the case for return on investment, which is an incredibly important metric that universities and colleges abide by. So tell us in particular, how do you made the case? And I know that students were pressure points, but what other pressure points and how did you make the argument for doing this program? And anybody can jump in.
I think I would say the baseline argument for us has been that it's our mission. Like that's what educational institutions do and should do, is provide education to those who need education in our community. And I realize that, you know, going from the abstract reasons to why we should do that to the financial considerations is a big leap. But at the base, it's what we do.
Exactly.
I think the mission is that is like a key point in it, like coming back to like, this is the point of the institution, this is who we're meant to engage with. I think with additional pressure points, I still see it as a lot of kind of sensitizing people to the information that they don't have access to or that they're just completely not aware of. So like I imagine like my colleagues here, they know so much about immigration that it's like, of course this is important. Like I know everything about it and I know what the issues are. But for so many folks, even the difference between what is a refugee and what is an asylum seeking individual is not something that's readily accessible to them. And so sometimes in like these meetings to facilitate the access of these funds, I'll sometimes overwhelm people with information so that they're like, oh my God, we need to do something right now. And that like elicits a reaction from them. But yes, I think that in addition to everything else that folks have mentioned.
Well, thank you so much. And there's let's end on this wonderful note and say thank you so much to our distinguished panelists. You guys are all, you know, we really are grateful for everything that you do. And we hope that these wonderful models really take off and find roots in other places. The map you shared, Dr. Abdu, is going to be etched in our minds. And it's going to be a motivating, you know, force for us. Thank you again so much. And thanks everybody. Please stay in touch. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.